The start of the third season of The Mandalorian cannot be called perfect. The first episode was released a week ago, but in essence it was very dull and disjointed, even by Mandalorian writer standards. However, the second episode noticeably changed the narrative angle, making the plot incredibly tense and interesting. What did we learn about Grogu? Why is that legendary Mythosaur so important? And what will happen in the third season? Get ready to brew some tea or cocoa, because in the next couple of minutes you will embark on a fascinating journey through the most interesting corners of perhaps the darkest episode of the series. Ready? Let's go! In the second episode, we really liked the interaction between Grogu and the other characters. The creators of the series promised us a more significant role for Grogu in the plot, and we really got it. Previously, there was a feeling that our Mando was talking to Grogu like a little child, and essentially, it was a monologue in which the other side didn't understand anything and could only smile. But it turned out not to be the case. First of all, in the first episode, Din gave his friend advice on navigation in space and how to deal with pirates. The second episode continued the Mandalorian's life lessons, on which Grogu also learned to navigate in space and memorized different details about Mandalore's system navigation. And most importantly, he proved that he understands Din. Mando showed him on the map where Bo Katan was, and Grogu was able to get to the ship by himself, directed the droid to our Red Beauty's location. Secondly, Grogu is now a full-fledged character who constantly uses his strength, serves as a navigator, and defends the rear guard quite well. This is great evidence that he has grown since the first episode of the first season and understands the world much more than before, which means that the decision that Luke Skywalker made that forced him to take that path was not a mindless whim, but a conscious choice of an already intelligent creature. And this wasn't only an interaction with Mando. Our little Grogu felt perfectly comfortable next to an adult woman who was not necessarily kind to him and his daddy before this moment. Regarding Bo Katan and her full-fledged appearance in the plot, we are very happy with the decision of the writers. This character is complex and multi-layered, particularly in terms of her personal history and the history of Mandalore, which was a very contentious issue for the series until recently. Yes, the Star Wars universe has old and extensive legends, as well as canon from the Clone Wars, in which Bo Katan and other important Mandalorians played a key role. But so few people knew about these details that we had to explain them from clip to clip. What is the Great Purge? Who is Bo Katan? Why does she hold different views than Din Djarin? And who are these children of the Watch anyway? Now everything has fallen into place, and we simply feel sorry for the fiery beauty in a very human way. She has literally lost everything, and her only friend is a religious fanatic whose friends once turned away from the native Mandalore and formed a community called the Children of the Watch. These fanatics chose their path and to some extent were involved in the destruction of Mandalore, the destruction of Bo Katan's home, and the death of her loved ones. Well, now the girl will take center stage in the plot, which may have been aided by the quick dismissal of Gina Carano from the series at some point. Now, let's talk about the ending of the episode, as it unexpectedly turned out to be a rare gem for Star Wars enthusiasts. As we have discussed earlier, the second episode essentially formalized that same universe of the animated series and other sources related to Star Wars that were not previously traced in movies and TV shows. While the Clone Wars and other projects have always been part of the canon, the audience for animated series is so tiny that it hardly compares to that of, say, Andor. So in the key narrative, there was one important character for Bo Katan that we have repeatedly talked about, Mandalore the First. According to legends, the planet Mandalore was founded on ancient mines inhabited by a terrifying Mythosaur, a beast that was supposedly killed by the first human to take the title of Mandalore. Who is this Mythosaur? Mythosaurs lived on the planet Mandalore even in the time of the Old Republic, although more likely they appeared on the planet long before this period due to their enormous size. Mythosaurs had no natural enemies on the planet until about 7,000 years ago. The Tongue, the predecessors of the Mandalorians, arrived on Mandalore, migrating there from the planet Rune and beginning to colonize the planet. the Tong hunted the Mythosaurs to clear the territory for their own needs, as well as to test their combat skills on them, until eventually they completely eradicated these creatures. It is important to note that the Mythosaurs were simply incredibly huge. Some individual specimens were even comparable to a small town. What can this tell us? Firstly, it can be assumed that everything previously known about the history of Mandalore is pure lies. We have two characters from different strata of society: Bo Katan, the daughter of royal blood, and Din Djarin, a follower of radical views of local sectarians. And both of them grew up under the sign of Mandalore, meaning they always knew that the logo of their people is the skull of the legendary Mythosaur, creature that was supposedly killed by the Mandalore the First. What if it was actually a lie? What if, back in those ancient times, the one who called himself the Great Mandalore didn't actually kill any Mythosaur? Perhaps there was some sort of battle between them, in which both opponents came out heavily battered, but since the Great Mandalore saw the defeated beast slink away into its den, he considered it dead. If we draw a parallel, something similar happened in the Hobbit trilogy, where Thorin Oakenshield believed for a long time that Azog the Defiler has died from his wounds, but that turned out to be untrue. Alternatively, the Great Mandalore may have entirely made up the story of the Mythosaur, believing them to be long extinct, and attributed to himself a feat that nobody knows or saw, which helped to unite the people in those distant times, essentially forming the planet of Mandalore, which lasted until its downfall. But there is also a second option, and it is not known for certain how Mythosaurs reproduce. And considering their size and habitat in water, theoretically, if we draw an analogy with earthly animals, they could be something like our reptiles and spend some time in an egg underwater. Perhaps the last Mythosaur left offspring that nobody knew about. Then a catastrophe happened, and our newly hatched monster lived in the darkness of the deep waters for a long time. Both of these options are extremely important for the future plot, and here's why. After a rather vague episode in the form of the first episode of the third season, we sincerely believed that Din Djarin and Grogu would reach the Mandalore mines with this approach, perhaps by the 7th episode of the season, while also carrying out various side quests from other NPCs as usual. But considering that the second episode was officially called The Mandalore Mines and our hero achieved his goal and bathed in living waters, there are no more threads to grab onto for a new global plot. Or are there? In the previous episode, Bo Katan told Din and Grogu that all of her associates had scattered across the galaxy, unable to find solace under the guidance of someone who was only nominally their leader. The people of Mandalore are scattered, the planet is destroyed. That's how it was before, and now everything can change. First of all, as it turned out, Mandalore is a perfectly livable planet, despite its unique features and dangers. Even on Tatooine, it was never safe, and the magnetic shield, on the contrary, would allow Mandalore's secrets to be kept hidden, without revealing information beyond the walls of a house. Din has the dark saber, the rarest and most important relic that gives power over all Mandalorians. And our heroes now know that the legendary Mythosaur is still alive, which is not just some danger lurking beneath the planet's surface, but an opportunity to prove to the entire galaxy that the legacy of the Great Mandalore is still alive. Once he was able to unite an entire people and scattered tribes, making Mandalore a great planet. And that's why our heroes can try to do something similar again. If in different corners of the galaxy, people find out that on harmless Mandalore, two representatives of two different directions united defeated the great monster, this will help to unite the scattered people and start everything anew. And thus, we get a full-fledged plot for the third and possibly even fourth season. Of course, we always have Baby Yoda and his storyline in reserve. But obviously, it will also develop, but already in secondary episodes. Because now Mando is seriously taking on the training of Baby Yoda. What do you think about this? Do you like the idea of a plot about uniting Mandalore? There have been many hints about this before, but the lion's share of Star Wars viewers still think that this is a series about Baby Yoda and the Jedi, although this is not the case at all. In general, we like where the Mandalorian plot is going, and if the episodes continue to be as intense as the second episode, then the series has a great future, which we don't doubt. Until next time, friends. And remember, this is the way.